So when we talk about following Jesus, it's not a straight line. I know from my own experience, again, not that I want to make my experience normative for anybody else, but my experience, I have the pointer. You see that on the left-hand side has the straight line, right? From the moment that the Spirit comes upon you to following Jesus straight. That's not how it works. It's not how it worked in my life. The Spirit of God came into my life, but then my life looked more like on the right. I mean, just, trying to make sense. The Spirit of God moved. Yes, it was real. But remember, in my prayer, I said, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I really didn't. I have no idea what to do next, which I didn't know. And it just felt like I was stumbling through. And so the reality of what it looks like to follow Jesus is more like what it looks like on the right-hand side. It is not a straight line. There are many twists and turns, some of them positive, some of them negative. There are roadblocks and there are obstacles in the way of following Jesus. There's a term that is used, and it's called, I'm going to share that in a little bit here, but as a pastor, I just want to preface this with saying this. As a pastor, my concern for you is your spiritual growth, your connection with God, that you can flourish in your relationship with God and your relationship with one another, that this church can flourish. As a pastor, that's what I want for this church, Newport Richey, that during my time here, that each and every person here can be strengthened in their walk with Christ, that you can come closer to Christ, that through my time here, my ministry here, that you will have a closer walk with Christ. That is the responsibility, that is the burden in the positive sense that I have, is encouraging you, pointing you to Jesus. I don't know if I should say that again or not or repeat it, but that is my burden. That is what I want for you all, each and every person here. But so now I'm going to have to speak a little bit directly. Is that okay? As a person that cares about you, cares about your spiritual welfare, and as we're trying to point you to Jesus, that's what I'm trying to do, is point you to Jesus. I have to speak to you a little bit directly. There are roadblocks and there are obstacles in the way of moving in the direction of Jesus. I'm going to mention some of those roadblocks right now, okay? And I do this in love. Sometimes in that spiritual journey, we will find ourselves in the middle of extremes. Now, I've never met someone who's in the middle of an extreme, recognizing and acknowledging that they're in the middle of an extreme. But watch out for extremes in your spiritual experience. What we're looking for is staying on that straight and narrow, right? Finding that balance, not going to either extreme. In your journey with Jesus, watch out for extremes. So here's the term, and Ellen White actually uses this term. She calls it monomania. And she actually calls some individuals monomaniacs in her day. And what she means by that is that there is just sometimes we will just focus on one thing, and we will make all of religion and all of spirituality about that one thing. Have you ever been there before? Have you ever known someone who has been there before? Let me give you an example if you don't know what I'm talking about. I mentioned Ellen White. Sometimes in our journey in pursuing Jesus and trying to seek Jesus in our spiritual experience, we'll make everything about Ellen White. And everything will be Ellen White. And every quote and every phrase will be Ellen White. Now, I preached a series about this a few years ago. If you don't know who Ellen White is, there's a series that I preached a couple years ago. For those of you watching online, there's a series, a playlist about Ellen White, who Ellen White is. A wonderful woman, amazing woman. We believe the Spirit of God was leading her. But I think she would feel uncomfortable with individuals making everything about her. In fact, in her ministry, she says, I am here to point people to Jesus. That was what her ministry was all about. So sometimes in our journey towards Jesus, we will run into extremes. We may become monomaniacs in focusing on just one thing, or sometimes in your journey in sincerity of Jesus, there will be a strong focus on just right behavior. and we have to get it all right. And so we start eating right, and then we start dressing right, and then we start listening to the right music, and then we try to do everything right. Have you been there, or have you known someone who has been there? Christianity, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. Sounds heretical. Christianity is more than just right behavior. Is that too hard? Is that too strong? Christianity is first and foremost about a relationship with Jesus. That's what it's about. And so you're going to probably hear me say a lot of heretical things. I'm going to say a few things about the church as well. But what I'm trying to do with this series is just kind of clear the table, and let's see if we can get back to the foundation of our faith, which is Jesus. Nothing wrong with right behavior, but sometimes there's just that focus on getting everything right. Watch out for extremes. Watch out for monomania. Watch out for, and I could list as a pastor, I've seen this in my churches. I've seen church members go down this rabbit hole. I mentioned Bible translations. I preached a series about that for years. I get church members that get stuck on Bible translations and one Bible translation alone, and it's only that one Bible translation. I see church members getting stuck with conspiracies. Have you been there? Do you know one? Getting stuck with conspiracies. I've had church members, not here, my previous district, believe it or not, and I think I've shared this with you all. They come up to me and they say, Pastor Jonathan, are you a Jesuit? Are you a Jesuit? Because they're everywhere. And I responded, and bless her heart, and she was sincere. And I told her, I don't know if you know what a Jesuit is or not, but there's this conspiracy that they're everywhere. They're around every corner. They're underneath every pew. They're everywhere. And they're an order. It's a priesthood, and they're a specific society of Catholic priests. They're Jesuits. And I said, one of the things about being a priest, about being a Jesuit, is you take a vow of celibacy. I'm married. I have a wife. And her response to me was, it was, Jesuits can be anything, anywhere. That was her response. I didn't have children back then, but I could say now I'm married and I have children. That just doesn't work. But in her mind, it was like, no, they can take any form and any shape and anything. There's no limits. It's just, her imagination, it just could go as wild as her imagination could go. Be careful of extremes. Be careful of extremes. Here's another one. Forgive me, Newport Richie, that I have to speak so directly to you. Here's another one. The Pope. Here's another one. The Pope. I don't know if you know or not, but the Pope, I think, is ill. That's the word, at least, that's gotten to me. And some people have said, pray for the Pope, and I was like, well, that's kind of, I guess so. That's kind of weird, but as admin, it's to pray for the Pope, but I guess so, right? We don't wish ill on anybody. But as they were telling me, oh yeah, the Pope is ill, most likely he's going to pass away. And when they said that, most likely he's going to pass away, I'm like, all right, here it comes. Here it comes. The Pope passes away. A new Pope is going to get, selected. And here come all this, all the conspiracy theories about how that Pope is going to be the one that's going to usher in the end of the market. Have you guys heard that? It's like every Pope, here it comes again. Just get ready. Here's another one, prophecy. I had a church member that all they wanted to do was prophecy. Pastor, preach on prophecy. And I like to, on October, I like to preach on prophecy. I believe prophecy is important, but all he was talking about ever was prophecy and prophecy and prophecy and prophecy and prophecy. And there's a place for prophecy, don't get me wrong. But there's more than just prophecy. In fact, it's going to get even tougher, Newport Richie. It's going to get even tougher. I'm getting closer to home. Monomania and extremes, be careful about it. Some people are still living in 2020 and in the middle of the pandemic and COVID, and they can't get over that. And they've made their religion all about COVID and all about the vaccine and all about the mandates and all about the jab, and they just can't get over it. They're still there. Our purpose is to look to Jesus. Our purpose is to focus on Jesus. Please don't get distracted by extremes. Another one, it's coming even closer. I've noticed now that some people have made politics their religion, and everything is about politics. And I'm on Facebook, because I wanted to see the pictures of my friends and what they're up to. And on social media, it's all about politics. Everything has become political nowadays. Please, Newport Richey, let's stay away from extremes. Let's stay away from monomania. And then, of course, criticism, where we're always criticizing everything. And then we're just waiting for the next buzzword. What's the next thing that we can jump on to focus on? And all of it distracts us from Jesus. And I say this as someone whose journey towards Jesus looks like it does on the right-hand side. I've been there, I've done that, and I'm just asking Jesus, help me to find the way. Help me to stay focused on you. Jesus also mentioned a few obstacles in our spiritual life. He tells a parable in Matthew, this is Matthew chapter 13, I think it is. I could be wrong. But he tells us a few parables in Matthew and in Mark where he speaks about 4 different types of ground. That when the Spirit of God comes, and remember the seed, a sower goes forth to sow seed. And remember how John and Peter, they use that concept of a seed for the work of the Spirit of God. And so Jesus says the sower goes and he spreads the seed of the kingdom of God, of the work of the Spirit. He sows it in people's hearts. And the response of people are differently when that seed lands on their hearts. Some of that seed lands on hard ground or the road that gets trampled on. If you notice, things don't grow where there's a road. Have you noticed that? Where there's a path, things don't grow there because it keeps getting trampled. So watch out for these obstacles as the Spirit of God is moving in your life. Watch out that the seed, the work of the Spirit is not being trampled on your life, that you're not trampling on the work of the Spirit in your life. Then Jesus mentions there's other type of ground. It's a stony ground. And when the work of the Spirit lands in that heart that is stony, he says there's excitement. And I love it when someone comes to Christ and there's excitement. How many of you are excited when someone comes to Christ, right? It's exciting. And I love to see the excitement, but then I'm also bracing myself because sometimes that excitement dies down, as Jesus says. It dies down because there's no roots there. There's no roots. And so as you're walking with Christ in your journey, please make sure that you're developing roots. And we'll talk more about this later on in our series about developing roots. So I'm excited for that, but then watch out because sometimes there is no roots. And I've seen it. I've seen church members are excited, and then after a few months, after a year, we don't see them anymore. They've fallen away from their experience with Christ, and it hurts me as a pastor. It hurts me. Another obstacle that Jesus warns us about in our journey with him are the thorns. And he likens this to just life. Life happens. In the middle of our spiritual walk with Christ, life happens. Jesus says the cares of this world, we just get busy. We don't have any time. He says we get discouraged. He says sometimes the pursuit of money or prosperity or success, it distracts us from our relationship with Christ, and eventually it gets choked out. And then finally, Jesus says there's good ground. Now, if any of you have ever planted anything or sown anything, you know that there's no such thing as good ground. Now, some ground is more fertile than others, but if you leave the ground by itself, sure enough, weeds are going to spring up. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen. There's no such thing as good ground. You have to work it. But when we're going to look at this a little bit more, but that's ultimately what we want, is to allow the seed, the Spirit of God, to be able to flourish in our heart and in our life. So watch out again for these obstacles. Okay, so coming back to this. So the Spirit of God moves in our life. We have the new birth experience. We're born again. The wind of God starts blowing in our life and starts moving in our life. The Spirit of God then starts pointing us to Jesus. And then we see Jesus with that invitation to us to come and to follow him. So what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it mean to accept that invitation? Come, follow me. But first, who are you following, Newport Richey? Who are you following? We are all following someone or something. Maybe before the dawn of social media, maybe we weren't as aware of who we were following, but I am on Twitter, and you can see everybody who I am following on Twitter, on social media. Who are you following on your social media platform? Who are you following? Who, Newport Richie, who do you admire? Do you want to see who some of the top people are that are being followed? Do you want to see who they are? Now, this is just from Twitter. I'm sure there's. I've gotten left behind. Is it? What's some of the other ones out there? I just know Facebook and Twitter. What are the other ones? Instagram. Okay, Instagram, right? And you can follow people on Instagram. Yeah. Okay. What else is it? Snapchat or okay. So some of these other ones. Okay. TikTok. There it is. That's the one I remember hearing about. That one. TikTok. So who are you following? This list is just from Twitter, but look who people are following on Twitter. Who are you following? The owner of Twitter has 219 million followers. I don't know if you know about that. Seventh-day Adventist Church has about 20 million members, give or take. He has about 219 million followers. President Obama has 130 million followers. Cristiano Ronaldo has 114 million followers. Justin Bieber has 109 million followers. Rihanna has 108 million followers. And I believe this is the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. Forgive me if I mispronounced it. 105 million followers. Katy Perry, 105 million followers. I didn't even recognize her in that picture, but anyways. Our current president, 101 million followers. Taylor Swift, 94 million followers. Remember how many Adventists are there in the world? There's 20 million Seventh-day Adventists. And believe it or not, there's an institution that rounds up the top 10 of followers, and that is NASA. NASA has about 84 million followers. Newport Richie, who are you following? Are you following the Royals? I had a church member in my previous district. She was all about the Royals, and I remember, and nothing wrong with, I'm saying nothing wrong with this. Everything in balance, okay? Nothing wrong with this, right? But I remember she was following the Royals, and I remember something happened with the Royals something a few years ago, and she was telling me all about, this and that and here and there and whatever about the Royals. I mean, she wasn't even from England, so, she's American, but she was just following the Royals. Celebrities. Do you follow celebrities? Are you intrigued by the life of celebrities? No? Good for you. Sometimes I am. Celebrities. I remember there was a show back in the day, The Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous. Do you remember that one, right? Where you get a chance to follow. What does that look like? Do you follow storylines that are out there? In Spanish churches, we love talking about telenovelas, soap operas, right? Are you following storylines about Caitlin and Declan and who knows, what other characters there are? What are you following? Reality TV, are you following? Who are you following? Or you're a little bit more cultured, and so you follow business leaders, and you follow luminaries. Or do you follow actors, and do you follow influencers? Who are you following, Newport Richie? Or maybe I should ask it this way. What are you following? Are you following politics? Are you following entertainment? Are you following the stock markets? Are you following the economy? Are you following tech news, automotive, sports, shopping trends, fashion, social media, news? Are you following pundits? Who or what are you following? Or maybe I could ask it this other way. In whom are you trusting? Who or what are you entrusting your life to? Or who or what do you put your faith in to lead you to the life you desire? I don't know if this sounds too harsh. Can any of those individuals or institutions lead us to the life that we desire? Notice what the Bible says in Jeremiah chapter 17 and verse 15. Cursed is the one who trusts in man and makes flesh their strength. Or maybe we're trusting in this. Maybe we're putting our faith in this, right? Gives a little bit of security, a little security blanket. Maybe we're trusting in our belongings. But I think you were aware of what happened a few months ago to the belongings and the possessions of individuals in California. And I think, we're not immune to that living in Florida. I think we have a yearly wake-up call during hurricane season that we cannot put our faith and our trust in our belongings or what we have or what we possess. Where are we trusting in? Oh, this is a little tougher. Are we trusting in the government to bail us out and to give us the salvation that we so long for? Who are we placing our trust in? Institutions, or I don't know if you know what this building is. This is the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Are we placing our faith and our hopes in the church and in the institution? It's getting hard. It's getting tough. All right, so let's swap it out. Let's make it easier for you. What if instead of a picture of the General Conference, and this is in Silver Spring, Maryland, where our headquarters are, what if I swap the image to an image of the Vatican, right? That would be a lot easier for us to say, right? Oh, no, of course we don't trust, right? Of course we don't trust in the Vatican. If I put another picture of another church there, Southern Baptist, oh, of course, we don't trust in them. Or the United Methodist, of course we don't trust in them. But what about our church? In whom are we trusting? Now, I know this sounds so heretical here, to even mention something like this. But again, remember what I'm trying to do is clear the table. What is the foundation of our spirituality and of our Christianity? It is Jesus. It is the work of the Spirit of God in our lives, pointing us to Jesus. Jesus gives us the invitation to follow Him, not to follow other men, not to follow other institutions, including our church. And again, there's nothing wrong with the church. There's a purpose for the church, and we're going to talk about the purpose for the church. There is a purpose for the church. But what we have to do is there's a place for the church, but we have to make sure that the church is in its proper place. And what we haven't done is place the church somewhere where it doesn't need to be. The church is not the representative of Christ on earth. Some faiths believe that. We don't believe that. It is the Holy Spirit who is a representative of Christ on earth. It is not the church. There is a purpose for the church, but we have to put the church in its proper place. We can't have unrealistic expectations. And again, if I could argue this from a biblical standpoint, Newport Richie, in the Old Testament, over and over again, in fact, I heard it multiple times this morning even. Olivia, in your appeal that you made, in your exhortation, Charlotte, in the prayer that you mentioned, I heard this theme over and over again, that the Old Testament points us to God. Over and over and over again, the Old Testament points us to God. Psalm chapter 121, it says, I will lift up mine eyes to the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from where? From God. Never in the Old Testament does God point us to the priesthood. It's in the priests, it's in the Levites that you will find your help. No, there was a place for the Levites, there was a place for the priests, but it was to point people to God. You could say the same about the sanctuary, the same about the building. Never do you find in the Old Testament God telling you to place your confidence in a king. And there were kings in the Old Testament. There was King David. And look what happened to Uriah for putting his trust in a man, even though it was a good king and a good man. Over and over again, the Bible points us to look to God as a source of our help, as a source of our salvation, not to institutions, not to individuals. There is a place for it in its proper place. But ultimately, Newport Richie, we have to look to God. So I ask you again, who are you following? What are you following? What are you putting your trust in? Now, it's only natural as humans to be drawn to other humans. Again, a celebrity that intrigues you, a guru, there's actors that intrigue me. I like the work that they do, just to be honest, a historical figure. I'm always looking for a leader. I'm speaking about myself. I am always, as a leader, as a pastor, I am always looking for a leader to follow, for someone to admire, for someone that I can emulate, for someone that I can look up to, from someone that I can learn from someone that I think has it all together, maybe more so than I, someone that has more experience than I do, someone that is optimistic and inspiring and successful. Isn't that the kind of leader you want, right? Someone that's gifted, someone that's talented. And over again, especially when I was younger, over and over again as I was following these individuals, the more I got to know them, the greater my disappointment. Because the closer I got to them, I realized they're just human beings. They're just human beings, just like you and me. Yes, maybe they have more experience. Yes, maybe they have a little bit, more giftedness and talent and whatever and success. But ultimately, they are just human beings. If you put your trust in human beings, you will be disappointed. If you put your trust in institutions, you will be disappointed. And so when Jesus says, "Come, follow me," what he's saying is exactly that. Look to me, follow me, spend time with me. All the time that you're spending learning about all these other people, use that time to learn about me, is what Jesus says. Spend time with me, learn about my story, learn about who I am. Learn about my life, learn about my teaching, learn about my way of thinking, learn about my way of living. This is Jesus. Learn about my way of doing, my way of behaving. And if you do that, if you come to me and you follow me, is what Jesus says. If you do that, he says this, he gives us this promise. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, he says. Take my yoke upon you, he says. And we're going to talk about what that means in future sermons, to take on the yoke of Christ. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, he says. Learn from me, and you will find rest for your souls. I mentioned this last week. Soul rest. How many of us don't want that living in this world? We want that peace of Christ. We want soul rest. Again, who of these can offer that to you? Who of these can give you rest? Who of these can show you the path towards your desired life, a pathway towards flourishing, right? These individuals are just as broken. I don't want to speak for them, but I guarantee you they're just as broken as you and I. Maybe they've had more success than we have, or maybe they've had different opportunities than we have. Maybe they have different responsibilities than we have, but there are human beings just like me, you, just as broken, sometimes, Lord have mercy, even more, right? There's kind of, I don't want to joke about that, but you don't want to learn about a successful marriage from celebrities, do you? It's Jesus. It's Jesus. It's following Jesus. It's focusing on Jesus. The Holy Spirit moves in our life, pointing us to Jesus, to follow Jesus, to accept that invitation to follow Jesus. Jesus, Newport Richie, is the ultimate solution to the problem of the human condition. There is no problem in human life that Jesus cannot solve. Name the malaise. Name the malaise. Political polarization in general that we're seeing in the world today, in our country today, that we even see this polarization in the church today. Jesus is the answer. In the New Testament church, when the early Christian church, the disciples were polarized against one another. When the Spirit of God came upon them on the day of Pentecost, the Spirit of God resolved that polarization, and it brought them together into one accord. Name your malaise. Name the problem of the human condition. Jesus is the answer. Climate change. Who is the creator? Who is the God of this world? Who is the one that promises that one day he will create a new heavens and a new earth? Name your malaise and tell me if Jesus isn't the answer for that. The threat of global war. The Bible tells us, and this is where prophecy becomes helpful to us, because the Bible tells us in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation that the angels of God are going out into this world, ministering in this world to the leaders of the various nations and seeking to influence them positively, moving upon their hearts. In the book of Daniel, chapter 10, in the book of Revelation, again, it mentions that the four angels are going to the four winds, holding back the winds of strife. Jesus is ultimately the answer. And this is actually where prophecy becomes helpful to us, because now we know who's in control. It's Jesus. Now we know where we are in the stream of time. We're not just wandering aimlessly. Jesus is in control. Jesus is leading his people, and that's what prophecy is about how Jesus is leading us to ultimate redemption. Name your malaise and tell me if Jesus isn't the answer to the mental health crisis, who is the source of our joy and our hope and our healing and wisdom. Is it not Jesus? Name your malaise, addiction. Isn't Jesus the one who offers us freedom and liberty in his name? Name your malaise, Christian nationalism. Do you think we can learn something about how Jesus interacted with the government of his day, and how maybe that should inform us as Christians, how we should relate to the government in our day? Name your malaise and tell me if Jesus isn't the answer. Or how about this? How about our simple inability to be kind? Jesus is the answer, the Spirit of God coming in our lives, the seed of God, the sporus that will then bear fruit, the fruit of the Spirit, love and joy and peace and patience and long-suffering and gentleness in our life. Newport Richie, Jesus is the ultimate solution to the human problem. There is no problem in human life that Jesus cannot solve. And we've tried, Western society, we've tried to find answers to the malaise of society apart from Jesus. And so we think the answer is in education, more education, and that's helpful. I'm not saying it's not. We've tried through science. It's helpful. I'm not saying it's not. We've tried through healthcare. It's helpful. I'm not saying it's not. We've tried through technology. It's helpful. I'm not saying it's not. We try to correct the malaise of society through legislation. That's helpful. I'm not saying it's not. We've tried to resolve it through economics. It's helpful. I'm not saying it's not. We've tried to correct the ills of society through social reforms. It's helpful. I'm not saying we're not. But even as we implement all these reforms, the human heart still finds a way to corrupt it all. The ultimate solution is Jesus. And so, Newport Richie, let's go back to the beginning, will you? Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the foundation of our faith, being in tune with the Spirit, the reality of the new birth, allowing the wind of God to blow into our lives, tapping into the grace of God, allowing the Spirit to point you to Jesus. Watch out for all those obstacles and deviations on the way, but allowing the Spirit of God to point us to Jesus, accepting his invitation to follow him. Learning from him then, placing our trust solely in him, taking his yoke upon us, and as a result, receiving from Jesus the rest that our souls long for, the solution to our problems. Can we allow Jesus to show us, to lead us to the life we desire and long for, Newport Richie? Can we do that? How many of you want that today?